Hello, everyone. I'm Larry Walsh, and this is Changing Channels. I have a lot of conversations around the industry, talk with vendors and partners on a daily basis, and every conversation has artificial intelligence in it. I've said it before. We can't stop talking about it. It is what is happening today, and it is what is going to dominate the future. And over the next 3 to 5 years, we are literally going to have trillions spent on the development of artificial intelligence, as well as the services that go into making it work and work well. Now, here is a complaint, if you will, from the end user community, is that they are looking for the companies, the ones with the expertise, to help them with what they were doing yesterday. So this is the legacy infrastructure, the applications, the security issues. This is all the stuff that they've always have to deal with and will continue to deal with, as well as helping to guide them on their artificial intelligence journey. Now, last year, MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, released a study that said 95% of enterprise AI projects failed. And it was an easy stat to believe. And I'm not saying you don't disbelieve it. It's true. And the reason why is because everyone went into AI at first looking to spend money. They didn't go into it with intent. Now people or companies are looking at it and saying, we want to do something. We know we need to do something, but we need help. We need guidance. And they're looking for the partners that can do that. And they're not as easy to find as you would think. And one managed service provider has looked at this and said, not only is this an opportunity to look at how to service customers without thinking about reselling tokens, reselling artificial intelligence, but rather selling the experience, selling the outcomes. And they've placed their bets on that, and it has earned them a spot in Anthropic's new channel program, and it is earning them new business with customers up and down the chain. They're just looking for someone who's going to help them imagine or translate their imagination for an artificial intelligence into working systems. And that company is RapidScale. And so we've invited their president, Duane Barnes, to come join us to talk about his view of how AI is going to reshape managed services, what it means to companies like his, and most importantly, beyond just thinking about the customer value proposition, what do the vendors need to know? What do the channel chiefs need to know about working with a company like his? This is Changing Channels. I'm Larry Walsh. Let's get into it. Duane Barnes, welcome to Changing Channels.
Thanks for having me.
Well, it's great to have you here, and to talk about something nobody's talking about, AI. So, before we get into the conversation, though, let's start with you. Why don't you tell us a little bit about you and RapidScale? It'd be interesting to get your take on the world and what you're doing in it.
Yeah, sure. So I'm the president of RapidScale, and we're one of the leading managed cloud service providers in the market. We predominantly work with mid-market and enterprise organizations here in the U.S., and we really work with them across public, private, and hybrid cloud environments. And really what makes us different is we don't just sell the infrastructure or resell the licensing. We really try to embed ourselves as the long-term sort of strategic partners and really help clients extend their technology reach and accelerate growth and create those business outcomes. So we do hold the premier status with most of these providers, including Amazon, Microsoft Azure, Google Cloud, and even Broadcom's VMware platforms, which really puts us in a bit of a rare position to give clients that truly unbiased guidance. And most recently, we were selected as one of the few authorized Anthropic resellers as well in the initial cohort of AWS partners. So it was a months-long process, and being selected alongside that small group is real validation of the AI expertise our team has built.
Interesting. Well, I want to come back to that because I'd like to hear a little bit more about what that process was like. But before we get into it, and I joke about this about nobody's talking about AI. It's like I did a podcast not too long ago, where it got all the way to the end of the recording before somebody said AI. I was like, "Oh, we
Wow.
almost made it. We almost made it." But it did get me thinking, though, is that over the last 20 years, how many times have we gone through this? It was, managed services, then cloud, then mobility, and then they started talking about big data and IoT. And for a hot minute, we were all, jazzed up about blockchain, and now we're in the AI era. So help me out here from your perspective. Where does AI rank in terms of the successive waves of technology innovation and change?
Well, I think this will be the biggest one we've ever seen since probably the Industrial Revolution. If we live so long to see the next thing after this, right? And it's changing everything. It's not just about end users, being more productive. It's changing construction. It's changing power grid management. It's changing supply chain, changing transportation, changing cities and towns how they manage water and power. We really haven't seen anything like this in over 100 years. So I don't think this will be as short lived as cloud or even IoT or some of the other things that sort of just faded into the background and we just are used to having them. I think AI is going to be front and center for a number of years to come and really embedded in just about everything we do, from our cars to our homes to our day-to-day business lives.
Something you said I can't let go by is that, if we live to see it, like, do you know something we don't know? I mean, there are
Well,
there are
to see the
doom
next thing after AI, I guess is my point there.
there are a fair number of doom and gloomers out there that have pretty dire
Yeah,
predictions about what all this means. I am not among them, but so
me neither.
you know, you've said that companies like yours shouldn't build an AI business around token margins or resale. But if you're not reselling, what are you doing? What is the revenue and profit model of the AI era?
Yeah, look, I think, in our case, we really always try to figure out how do we add value to the client. And reselling isn't really super valuable to most clients. And in our opinion, that then comes down to our expertise. And so that's really the sort of central question for every MSP right now. And I don't know that there's a perfect answer. And we're all sort of figuring out where we can, add value and protect margins. But here's how we're really thinking about it at RapidScale. The margin in the AI is not in the token, as you mentioned. It's in the implementation, the ongoing optimization of those environments, the full lifecycle management of an application consuming AI. As you know, and many of your viewers know, the price models are changing all the time. So you have to have somebody sort of watching that with expertise.
Mhm.
If you're trying to build a sustainable kind of AI practice by just marking up API costs, you're just probably going to lose, if not already lost. But if you're really helping a client architect an AI powered workflow and integrate it into their existing systems, monitor it for performance, monitor it for drift, and evolve it as the models improve, which is also super important, then that's a services engagement with real margin and real stickiness. And in terms of coaching our team, we've really shifted that conversation of, well, what's the gross margin on this transaction to what's the total contract value over the next several years.
Mm.
Consumption-based pricing typically favors that model because if the solution's working, the client's growing, and so does our relationship.
I like where you're going with this because what we're hearing this, out of those watching the managed services community, um, that there's a large swath of them out there that are getting older and looking to exit rather than to adopt or to evolve because they don't want to deal with the issues that come with it. You have a number of MSPs out there that continue to insist on sticking to what they did yesterday. So sell a contract, drop a few agents onto devices, monitor, react, move on. Not really providing the type of guidance that you're describing to the customers, and the customers really are looking for, and I hate using buzz phrases like this in the jargon. They really are looking for somebody, trusted advisors, or somebody that has the expertise and the trustworthiness to help them build a business practice, not necessarily adopt a technology. Is that a fair assessment of the landscape you see around you?
Yeah, I totally agree. And I always try to make things simpler outside of the technology realm. Could you buy a house without a realtor? Sure. Do you know all the local laws and zoning and water restrictions and all the things in that particular neighborhood with that particular house that a realtor knows? No. So you're kind of
Mhm.
rolling the dice doing it yourself. And so I totally agree with you. I don't like the jargon either, but there's a reason it exists, I guess, at some level. The trusted advisor, trusted partners, are really there to say, hey, look, we've been there, done this before. We've done 5 of these, 10 of these, 30 of these deployments. Here's the good, the bad, and the ugly. And hopefully you're getting unbiased advice with real business outcomes behind it. And so totally agree. I think, enterprise customers too, Larry, they didn't come to us a year or two ago saying, we know exactly what we want to use AI for, right? They came to us and said, hey, we have a board mandate or a board member or maybe even an industry mandate to start utilizing AI. And that's really where the conversation started a couple of years ago.
Yeah, last year, um, last fall, everybody was buzzing about that MIT study that came out. It said 95% of enterprise AI projects fail. And I was speaking at an event and somebody asked me about it. And they said, well, do you think that's true? I said, that's probably 99% because they didn't go in with a business problem that they were trying to solve. They went in with money that they had to spend. They lacked real intent. I still think that there's still a lot of businesses that are in that phase of their AI journey is that they know that they want to do something and they should do something, but they haven't quite figured out where to start. And that's where businesses like yours come in. But I want to come back to something you were saying about the economics, about the way you're looking at the total contract value. But does the gap that you and I were just talking about, does that create a broad opportunity for a company like RapidScale that you're able to capitalize on places where others can't because you have already made this pivot?
We'd like to think so, right? We've put a lot of time and energy into thinking about how to make money in this space. And frankly, if you even rewind a few years back, all the customers were clamoring to the public cloud, and for good reason. There's a lot of good things about that. But many VARs, resellers, TSDs, TAs couldn't figure out how to make money there. And I think that's the problem is when you start your mindset with like, how do I just make more money? You probably aren't going to succeed. And the customer's going to figure that out ultimately. And so for us, we said, hey, how do we add value first and then figure out how to make money? Right. It's sort of the old saying of, when you're little and your parents are like, just figure out what you love to do, then figure out how to make money and you'll never work a day in your life. Right. I think the same thing when you're running a business. Yes, we're here to make money, but if we're not helping a client and really future proofing their technology decisions, they're only going to be a client for a short period of time. And that's not
Yeah.
what I'm here for. We're really here to build those long term relationships. So I think from our perspective, we really said, hey, our clients are just looking for us to create an outcome for them, whether that's solving a supply chain issue or an accounting issue or an infrastructure issue. We can apply FinOps, for example, to private clouds. Many people don't think of it that way. They think of, well, why would you do that in a private cloud? Well, there's all kinds of new technology that, the private cloud hypervisors like VMware are coming out with where you can do advanced memory tiering and really get a lot more out of the investment you've already made if you're using the new features properly. And so we just add values in ways like that. And our clients just keep coming back for more projects, more services, and ultimately, trust us to manage their environments long term. And the money will come from that perspective. But just thinking about the old way of the cogs and the sale price, it doesn't really work in today's market with AI.
Yeah, I I think first of all, I don't just think you're right. I know you're right. I mean, the customer is looking for a better business for themselves. They're not thinking about that. I'm going to replace a typewriter with a PC, or they're going to replace a mail with a fax, or then email, right? I mean, they're not thinking about it in those terms. They're thinking about this as really being business transformation. Um, but the entire idea, though, is that looking at this from a total contract value, and looking, that's a good measure. It's not a new measure, but it's one that's, I agree, is that it's probably a place to start. But that's also putting a lot of revenue over time, not
Mhm.
necessarily covering your costs today. And there are real costs that come today. Your talent is expensive. Your infrastructure requires money to continue funding. So how do you balance between the the immediacy of the transactional mindset versus the strategic outlook for looking at revenue over time, or the total value of the engagement?
That's a great question, and I think the answer is rooted in how we're funded and how we're owned, our ownership structure. We don't really think in months and quarters; we think in years and decades, which is really hard to do in a technology business. But so many companies are private equity owned, for example, and they always have an exit in mind, right? When from the day they write the first check, they're expecting to get 5, 10x back in 3 to 5 years. And so you're never thinking about long-term contracts. You're just thinking about getting to that exit. And we just don't have that. And we haven't had it really since our founding. Um, you know, it, when you have the luxury of not worrying about an exit, you can take an EBITDA hit for a quarter, right? To do the right thing, whether that's investing in people, investing in platforms or other technologies, or long-term projects with long-term customers. It really just gives us a bit of a unique advantage from that perspective. But ultimately, we do bill our customers from a professional services or a consulting engagement in phases. And so we don't wait until a year down the road when we've completed an AI project to send them a bill then. So we agree up front that, hey, a project this size should have 2, 3, 4 milestones where we take a step back and say, did we deliver on that part of the project? Yes, great. Okay, we'll collect a quarter or 20% or 30% or whatever the milestone billing was, so that, to your point, we're not a year down the road. And if we were off by 1 degree on day one, how far off are we 12 months from now? We're
Right.
on a different planet, right? So we take pride in taking that pit stop with our clients and really going backwards and say, did we achieve the thing we collectively set out to achieve? Okay, handshake, great. We'll accept payment now and then move on to the next phase. And I think so many people get that wrong, and they just keep saying yes, and then you get you know scope creep and cost overruns, and then you end up with a bit of a divorce at the end between you and your client. And we just do things differently, and I think ultimately clients appreciate that. You have to hold them accountable many times on projects like this because they don't know what they don't know. And so
Uh,
when they get their first AWS bill or their first Anthropic bill, usually, that's a surprise, even though you've tried to prep them for it. You've tried to show them, the trends and all that sort of stuff. That doesn't make sense. It's not like looking at a utility bill. So, you know, again, we pride ourselves in being experts in that space and being able to help customers navigate through those different models and different lengths of projects.
mm. So you started to say this, and I told you we were going to come back to it, about your Anthropic experience. Now,
Yep.
Anthropic, which is the company behind Claude, which is currently well, I mean, by the time this podcast comes out, it may not be the most popular because they are constantly changing rankings. But right now, it is the most popular chatbot out there, and also I think enterprises tend to be gravitating towards more of the Anthropic LLMs or their modeling than the other platforms right now. But again, that's shifting. But what was the process like for RapidScale to go through to become an Anthropic partner? What did it take to demonstrate that you were the right fit for what they were trying to accomplish?
That's a great question. And so this really started with more of the marketplace model that was in place before. So if you were an enterprise and you wanted I really don't like the word discount, but let's say preferred pricing with Amazon.
Mhm.
Back in the old days, they called that an EDP. So, enterprise discount program. I think Amazon got tired of the word discount too, and they changed that to a PPA, or a private pricing addendum.
Right.
I'm bringing you back there because in most of those agreements, anything else you consumed in the AWS marketplace would count towards that dollar commitment. And so oftentimes, to get a good price, customers would overcommit themselves, and they would come to someone like a RapidScale and say, gee, like we're $100,000 short or $1 million short on our EDP or our PPA. What do you guys recommend? And we might say something like, well, do you have any AI projects or AI initiatives or any problems that we could use AI to solve? They would say, why? Oh, well, because Anthropic counts towards that commitment.
Mm.
And so that's really where all of this started. And then late last year, Anthropic decided, probably for good reason, if we're being nice to them, that they didn't want just anybody to get credit for that through the MSP marketplace. And so they said, hey, we're shutting you off. You've got 60 days to sort of decide if you want to become a direct partner of Anthropic. And we were like, yeah, of course we do. And so
Mhm.
that's really where we got sort of engaged with them directly, because we were already consulting on their platform. We just weren't participating in the sort of marketplace economics of it. To answer your question directly, from there, you have to be an AWS Premier partner. You have to have the AI ML competency, both of which are incredibly hard to get. And it would take multiple years to get if you were starting today. Just for an example, to get the AI ML competency, you have to have 3 enterprise customers deployed and consuming AI and use cases signed off by the customer, submitted to Amazon. So if you were a startup, it would take you quite some time to get through all of that. And then, Anthropic vets all the people that apply to the program, obviously checks with AWS in this case to make sure everything's legitimate. And then you kind of go through your normal contractual agreements. But as you might imagine, there's not that many AWS Premier partners and have the AI ML competency along with the 17 or 18 other ones that we have. And so the list gets really short to like you can count on one hand in the US.
Mhm.
And that was that first cohort that was allowed to participate in the Anthropic reseller agreement.
So you've talked about this, that the changes that are happening, because what you just described, it's not the most complicated process, or not even the most stringent set of expectations, but it's extensive, and
Yeah.
it does require a really good foundation of skills and capacity and capabilities to be able to make yourself aligned with a company like Anthropic. Um, but you've also said that you're expecting there to be a pretty significant shakeout in the MSP community because of all these changes. What do you mean by that? Is your Anthropic experience informing that thinking, or do you just think that the AI wave is going to propel some forward and wash over others?
Well, I think the barrier to entry is enormous. Used to, not even that long ago, 4 or 5 years ago, anybody could stand up a MSP.
Mhm.
Go buy a KCA license, go sign up with a VAR, and off you go. I think now the 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 ecosystem, so the largest of the large ISVs, the Microsofts of the world, and Google, Amazon, Anthropic, OpenAI, they don't want tens of thousands of partners. They don't have time. They don't want to staff their own internal teams to support a partner ecosystem that large. So they're really looking for people that are not going to do one deal every couple of years or every year, right? Which is the old MSP model. You might have 100 different ISV agreements, but you might only sell 3 or 4 on a regular basis, but you have the other 99 on the truck. That's not what the new way is, the new world, so to speak, from an MSP perspective is heading. It's heading towards elite partners that are transacting daily in the enterprise and mid-market. And I just don't think most of the MSPs out there are going to be able to not just make the shift from getting the contracts and the credentials, but finding the talent is another thing. Like we're fortunate that we have a global team. And so if I can't there's rarely a time where a client comes to me and says, "Hey, I need an XYZ expert that I can't have one either already on the bench or find one somewhere on the planet in a very short period of time." And it just takes scale and time in market to be able to do those types of things. And, you know, ultimately the pricing models are shifting. You can't just put an AI token on an invoice and resell it like you can a mouse pad, right? It's, by the minute, by the hour pricing. And just to have a consumption billing model in place as an MSP is a multi-million-dollar platform upgrade. And I see a world where MSPs will kind of get pushed down to the sort of 2 minute a truck model where I'm like rolling up to an office and fixing a printer and a laptop and, selling, peripherals. And then there's going to be the people that are doing the real data center architecture, cyber, managed AI, that type of stuff. And there won't be much left in the middle.
Do you think though, is because even when you say it like that, that doing the real data center design, management, security, helping with the layering on the technology under or over the business process. I mean, that is you're right, it's a different level of skill, but it still sounds very familiar. Are we finally at that place in the evolution of this business to where the understanding the customer and the customer needs and anticipating things to solve problems that they know and may not know they have has become the value proposition? Or is it still going to be rooted in the technology itself to where, because like the companies you work with, they have, you may not work on a quarter, but they do. And their salespeople get compensated still. I was just at an event where I was talking about this. I go, it's nice that you say you want to sell on value, but you're still going to fire a sales rep if he doesn't make his number at the end of the quarter. So where do you see that shaking out?
Well, look, I think they can work in harmony. And I say that because many of our inbound leads and our new client relationships come directly from an AWS seller or a Microsoft seller or a Google seller or an Anthropic seller, right? Who are measured quarterly and annually and largely measured on consumption. So they're looking for partners that can move workloads into their platforms. The salesperson would probably say the fastest. I would say the most reliably, and drive that consumption. And so they still get paid, right? But they're reliant on us to actually do the heavy lifting. And so I think I say in harmony because we're here, we've got a bench of talent, we've got all the credentials. And so when they bring us leads, they can rely on us to do that. And again, that pushes out all of the smaller or less capable MSPs that don't have those credentials or the people on staff. And they're very strict. It's not like the old days where you could go online and take a little sales certification or technical certification and you could just resell Checkpoint or you could resell Cisco. Like, they won't even let us attend a client meeting unless we have credentialed, professional level engineers in the meeting and in the room. It can't just be a normal sales engineer or solution engineer. They have to be credentialed with the specific technologies. So I do think it comes down to adding value and ultimately, yes, salespeople are coin operated globally, universally, and will always try to get a deal done. But when in concert with a partner, I think is where we add the sort of buffer for the client, because we're going to make sure, because we're the ones that care about the longer term relationship, right? The hyperscalers, they might in the Fortune 500, but probably outside of that, they don't have the human capital to manage the customers outside of that large enterprise. So we're there to add the value, make sure we make the right decisions with the client and their technology choices, and then everybody's happy, right? The client gets what they want,
right?
OEM seller gets what they want, and we get the long-term relationship.
So that's where I wanted to go with you on this next, which is you're pretty clear on this. You're not going to make money, or you shouldn't be trying to make money off of selling tokens. And by extension of that, probably not even selling the applications that the tokens are feeding, but selling on the experience. Yet, as we're talking about this, because I talk with the vendors all the time, and they are now almost universally adopting this position of they want you and them to sell on outcomes. And I kind of look at
Hmm.
them and I smile and I go, that's nice. I don't know what that means. And not only do I not know what that means, I also don't know what does it you mean you want to sell on that, right? Um, they're saying that, but at the same time, they're also embracing this other word, flywheel, because they think that once they get the customer in, they're going to continue to just cycle and cycle and make more money increasing up, which is somewhat what you're describing. So the question is that if you're doing your job correctly, does that mean that they get their flat, because you're focusing on the outcome, does that then facilitate the vendors you're working with to get that flywheel effect that they're looking for?
I think that answer depends. If you're talking about hardware vendors, I don't think it
Mm,
does.
hmm.
Hardware doesn't have any differentiated value at this point. And, I think we mentioned in our pre-call that we're x86 agnostic. Like whoever can get me the gear the fastest is what I put in the racks, and our customers don't care anymore. They used to 10, 15, 20 years ago. They wanted to know it was HP or they wanted to know it was IBM. Nobody's asked us that question in 10 years.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
I think though,
and for the record, if anybody that doesn't know this, IBM used to make servers.
yes, there you go. I forgot there might be a younger audience here. Good point. But if you're Amazon or you're Microsoft or Google, they do want you to be locked into their platforms, and they don't make any excuses or apologies for that. And so when they bring a partner like us in, we have to be really careful to not sell against them, right? And that sounds counterintuitive if you're us and we say we're selling on outcomes, but the three of those platforms are so similar and they have such similar, you know, technologies available to them. We can create the outcome still. I'm not sure what an OEM means by outcomes. I do know what they mean with the flywheel effect. They want to suck you into the machine and be able to sell you everything they have.
Yep.
Um, but I think from our perspective, when we talk about outcomes, we just want to point back to an ROI. Like, Mr. Customer, you invested in this project or this platform or this application. A year from now, we go back and say, did you get the thing you thought you were going to get from it? And if you didn't, let's figure out why. So the next project we can get there for you. And if you did, great. Let us know when you're ready for the next project. I don't find that OEMs and ISVs really think that way when they're talking about outcomes. They're talking about one thing. Like, you said you wanted X and we gave you X. It wasn't really the
Yeah.
year from now
Yeah.
ROI.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with you on that. I think that you're right, is that we gave you the thing we think is great.
Exactly.
I'm not saying that it's not. I'm just saying that there's a few more steps in between. But Duane, I want to, as I typically do, like, we need to look into the future. So I want to end on this note, which is, take a look 5 years out from now. You've already, started jumping ahead of the curve. You're planning for a future which is, built on AI, surrounded by AI, dominated by AI. So looking ahead 5 years, what do you think will distinguish MSPs from those that disappear, from those that will thrive versus those that will disappear? And what should businesses like yours be doing to future-proof against disruption?
Yeah, I think there's really two paths that are, I think, legitimate and probably both would be successful. One is the path we've taken, which is we're going to be, supplier agnostic or unbiased. And we're really just going to focus on outcomes. And so our view is we start with advisory and consulting and then lead to managed services. And we don't really care what platform that's on, what hardware that happens to use. And we've got enough scale. We've got relationships with all the key, suppliers from that perspective. And I think if you can do that and gain some scale, you'll be fine, right? You'll always be able to future proof not only your client's business, but also your own MSP. So just try hard never to be locked into one solution. Don't just be a Microsoft reseller, for example. That's probably not going to work out so well. I think the other path is verticalize, right? So go into a place where you have either a dense amount of revenue concentration, healthcare, finance, manufacturing, become a bit more of a niche verticalized MSP. And I think you'll find a lot of success there. And in many cases, verticals are looking for people with vertical expertise. And so we've done that to a certain extent with our advisory and consulting. We've got, healthcare and finance verticals where our teams have, deep expertise in those fields, and we have the credentials and the compliances for that. But again, if you're on the smaller side and you've got 50% of your customer base is healthcare, just go focus there and really spend your time in that area. And I think you'll find a lot of success.
One more question for you, because I imagine that you're a successful company and you're doing something that is not unique, but I would also say still fairly rare. This is going to make you really attractive, not just to customers, but to the vendors out there. They're going to look at you and say, hey, you've unlocked some secret sauce, and they're going to be reaching out if, I'm sure they already are. So what should they know about your business and how they should relate to it?
Yeah, it's a great question. I always tell new vendors or new entrants that knock on our doors a handful of very simple things that sort of drive our philosophy. One, you have to be easy to do business with. If you send me an MSA where it's a win-lose, and you're not familiar with MSPs, and you're not familiar with multi-tenancy, and you're not familiar with sort of how to transact in the MSP world, and you've just been selling to the enterprise the whole time, it's probably not going to work out. So you have to speak MSP, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Number two, you have to be API first. And we've been that way long before AI was as big as it is now. Meaning, I don't want to manually interact with your software or your hardware. It needs to be layered right in with all the other tools and platforms that we consume and be visible in our client portal to our clients without any custom coding or any, circus maneuvers to make it work. And three, there's got to be demand. If customers aren't knocking on our door asking about your solution, we're probably going to put you off to the side until we start hearing demand or signals from the market. Unless you just have some new mousetrap that we've never seen before and we think it's big. And I'd say lastly, financial stability. I think this one gets overlooked by so many clients on a regular basis. In particular with AI, so many of startups are not cash flow positive and aren't going to make it if they don't get acquired. And if it were me, I would not be putting my enterprise data with a startup that didn't have, at the very least, a very well-known bank behind them, if not equity partners, because you just don't know what's going to happen, a year from now.
Yep, completely agree. Duane, it's been great having you. Great conversation. Really appreciate you joining us.
Thanks for having me. It was a great conversation.
Well, that's about all the time we have for this edition of Changing Channels. Again, I want to thank our guest, Duane Barnes, the president of RapidScale, a very large MSP that's doing some great and interesting things in artificial intelligence. And as always, I want to thank all of you for joining us. We do Changing Channels to help exchange experiences and information with the rest of the channel community to help it make it better for everyone who works in it. If you like what we're doing here, please hit like, hit subscribe, tell your friends, and also check out our other podcasts, The Network Effect, as well as In the Margins. And also, please check out all of our best practices, research, and services that we offer at Channelnomics. Until next time, I'm Larry Walsh.